cover a few things first and then turn it over to our guests for the evening, Aaron Frazier and Chris Thomas, who are here from the Monroe County Democratic Committee. And you guys might want to sit down for a few minutes because we take a little while to do some business afterwards. But you're welcome to stand. You're free to relax. So thanks everybody for coming. I just wanted to catch you up on what we've been doing. So on the 5th of May, we attended our first activism fair, which was a group of Rochester activist groups who came together at the Visual Studies Workshop. And we each had tables and we shared information. And Gwen Faulkner, Jill Hampton, and Joan Buckley were very, very helpful on that. We sat there for a few hours. We added to our little bunch of things that we have. Now we have brochures. There's some out on the table. You can take some to, give to your friends and family and wow them. And also we have a verbal business card, which is kind of like our elevator pitch of who's Indivisible, what do we do. So you can print this out from, there's a link here on the presentation, which will go out on various posts. We'll put it out so you'll find it. So that went well. We had a comment day to oppose the CIA nominee Gina Haskell. And we shared that call-in day with other groups, other indivisible groups across New York State. It turns out, just in case you didn't know, there are 600 indivisible groups in New York State. It's amazing. And there are 6,000 indivisible groups across the country. There's at least 2 in every congressional district in the country in all 50 states. We had a Progressive Leaders Summit on the 10th. Chris and Aaron were our co-partners in that event. And thanks to Dawn and Christina and Emily and Lisa Marie and Herman for helping out with that event. I think that went real well. There was a lot of energy in the room. Probably we had maybe 20 groups that were represented, the leaders of Rochester area activist groups. And so we're trying to figure out how best to pool our resources, get active together, and move forward together. So there'll be more coming up on that. If you want to help us on that, we'd love you to help us plan that. There's lots and lots to do. We got a request from a professor, Jeremy Sarachan, at St. John Fisher, who's doing a documentary on gun violence prevention. And he asked if we could just kind of reach out and find some people who are willing to talk to him. And so we did that, and he got this enormous outpouring of people who wanted to talk to him. And he came up to us at the activism fair and thanked us because he said he got just what he needed, and it was because of Indivisible Rochester that he was able to get the number of people responding that he was looking for. So kudos to us. That was really great. And as always, we've got our Here's What I Learned rule document. This is the document that we put things out that we learn as the administration unfolds, and we get a civics lesson. And at the end of this, people are tagging on things that they've learned. And every month we can tell kind of what's going on. We learned this month about pen registers being different than surveillance of telephone conversations. Right. And we also learned that there are inspectors general in every major organization in the administration. And then there's a phrase being thrown around called time in a barrel, I guess. And so this is the kind of thing that we're putting on here. And the plan is that we're going to go to put these onto a long sheet or a roll of paper or something. We haven't quite figured that out yet. And we'll have a fun gathering, have some munchies, and we'll share markers and such. And we'll just write these things on this big long thing and see how long we can get. And then we'll take it to the top of an appropriate level, like a foyer or some kind of a vestibule, and we can unfurl it, and we can take a video of it, and we can send it into the Indivisible blog just for something fun to do. So that shouldn't be a complete loss. We'll learn something from the administration. Okay, so active members update. Most of you in the room here are active members, so thank you for signing up to be active members. We have our workspace. We've got a work group tool called Slack that we've been using, and it takes a little while to get used to a new tool, but I think most everybody's made the transition pretty well. We have training available though, so if you think you need training or extra help, just let us know. And it's been helpful because the teams can quickly interact with each other and plan things out, and it's connected into Google Docs, it's connected into our calendar, and so there's a lot of interaction there with the other tools that we use. So we're already working on several projects in small teams. So if you've signed up with as an active member and haven't found a way to participate, we're really counting on the active members to give some time to the organization to actually turn up and do stuff with us. So we're counting on you. One of the things we're just starting to do is to put our events in the Google Calendar. And so we don't really have a good way to tell whether people are going to show up for something. Like we had a meeting of the Legislative Action Committee scheduled on fairly short notice, unfortunately, but it was for Monday. And there was only 2 people who showed up out of like 10. And that was like, I wish I had known that the other 8 people weren't coming, because then we would have rescheduled it or done something different. So a couple of points there. One is, if you get a meeting notice and it asks you if you're going, please say yes or tell us no, just so we can keep track of who's going to show up. Because even if you don't use Google Calendar or it doesn't post to a calendar for you, if you could just respond to those meeting notices, it would be very helpful on our end, just in trying to plan so that we get, we know who's going to come, because there's no real good way to do that. If you haven't signed up for a committee yet, we've got committee sign-ups on the table there. We need active people. We'll get into some of the things that we're going to get onto here soon. And then also, if you do sign up for something and you can't make it, which, stuff happens, we understand that, but just, let somebody know. That's the only other thing that we've learned as we kind of rolled out the active members program. Okay, so just a few things from the Indivisible National Project. Here's some numbers that they just published. Only 1 in 5 eligible voters is 1 in 5 eligible voters in the U.S. isn't registered to vote, so that's 20% aren't registered, which is why we're so active in voter registration right now. 40% of eligible voters sat out the 2016 election, and there are 435 House seats up for election in November. That's all of them. It recycles turns over every 2 years. And there are 35 Senate seats up for grabs. Plus, there's a whole bunch of local races. There's school board votes today. If you get out of here before 9 o'clock, you could vote any local school board election. School board votes for budgets is today's vote. There's some links in here. When we post this, you'll be able to go to these pages. Indivisible is starting a pack. They're calling it a hybrid pack. Not sure exactly what that means. But they have been learning this as they go too. If you remember, a year ago, January, there was a Google document that got spread around that was just an idea. And it mushroomed into this Indivisible, this national organization with 6,000 local groups. So they're trying to figure out how best to organize and how to make the resources available to the local groups such as ours. So you'll be hearing more about that. It's coming soon, and we may actually benefit from that monetarily. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. And then there's a really good website out there called Indivisible 435 that's all about the elections. So all kinds of good resources about in the endorsement process and who the candidates are. There's information out there about the special elections that are going on now. Matter of fact, there are special elections, there are primaries going on today in other states. So all that information is out there. I want to just make sure that you know about that resource. It's a really good one. Okay, so next is our report on the Voter Access Committee. You guys have been kicking butt. You've really been amazing. So, John, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
We met, we probably had some under 8 people at our meeting. last night. Yes. The voter registration committee met last night, and we're growing, and we're looking for more locations. We are going to register voters at the Red Wings games, at Hart's Market, and last night the committee, everybody decided, different player got assigned one way or the other, got assigned a place to contact to see who can register voters. Lilac Festival, people were registered there. We found out perhaps students at Mercy and McQuaid might not be registered, so we'll be contacting them. Carol is going to register voters at the bus station. Mike lives somewhere near the Lilac Festival, and he is setting up a table in his driveway.
That's right.
Do you want to talk about your registration experience? I understand Friday night went well, Sunday.
Sure. Friday went pretty well. We were put over. It's Jeff Springett, the promoter. He's really for us, so that was really great, and he was happy to have us. He put us by the breastfeeding tent the first night. It's just way out. It's off in the corner, which turned out to be not so bad.
Yeah.
And then we went to Sunday. We were at the kind of the main, right next near the band. That was mixed. I wrote something else.
Yeah.
But I have never associated voter registration as a subversive activity. But apparently a lot of Trump people view it that way.
Oh, interesting.
And I got some comments, and then as I was packing up, I wanted to talk with him. And that was good. And we had a polite conversation. As polite as you can be when you're listening to some bad shit. Person. It's okay. I mean, I have relatives who are not that far gone. She's really far gone. But, she's telling me I brought God back to, Trump has brought God back. It's great. What he's done for the economy is incredible. So I didn't really want to take her on point by point.
Yeah, no.
But and she said, and I don't read any of that other fake news anymore. I only watch Fox News. So, it was like, I thought she was kidding for a while. She was absolutely sincere, and that was okay. So I just didn't tell her what to do, but I kind of told her the way I approach it. I watch Fox News as long as I can stand it, and then but multiple sources and read, and not just one person. So anyway, it was actually good.
And so, if you're interested in registering voters, come join us.
Yeah.
Our next meeting is June 4th at 6 o'clock East Ave, Wegmans. And everybody kind of reports back. We find out what are some possible places for us to go register. People sign up. And I do have a date for the next.
John, there was a group at the Indivisible Fair, 540 West Main. Did you get about that?
I think I did contacted him, and he was going to get back to me, and has not gotten back to me.
Okay. All right.
So I try to get
otherwise
I'll lose track of him. So go ahead.
If someone wants to help register at the Lilac Festival, just let me know.
It's going on this week, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next week.
Great.
Next day.
And we're nonpartisan as we register voters, right? Everybody works. And so, and the conference, we don't want to be confrontational. We want to get people registered, and then after they're registered, then we'll work on how to vote, or give them more information about, and enlighten vote. So, all right. So there's sign-ups over there. Again, if you want to be part of the voter registration committee, like I said, these guys are really kick butt. Okay, and then we have our next active committee is the Legislative Action Committee, and we have a meeting on the 23rd. It's in the Fairport Library, and there we're going to talk about our endorsement process for Indivisible Rochester. What we want to be able to do is pool our resources and get commitments from our members to give us a certain number of hours that we can pull together and then go to look at the candidates and say, with this many people and this much of a contribution in terms of feet on the street or knocking on doors or whatever we can do, we can afford to endorse maybe one or two candidates officially, right? Everybody can, of course, support whoever they want to, but as an organization, we have a process that we're going to follow, and it depends on us having a commitment from people of time that they're willing to spend on our endorsement process. So keep that in mind. We're going to be coming to people to get a commitment from our active members on, how much can you, over the course of the summer, commit to us, and we can put that in our pool, and then we can be able to divvy that up and decide how many candidates we can actually endorse. When we do, hopefully we'll be able to endorse a candidate or more than one candidate, and then we can take that endorsement to Indivisible National, and then they will put their endorsement behind that candidate. So that's awesome, right? There's a list out there now of the candidates that Indivisible is endorsing, and that's based on the contributions from their local groups. So we can be part of that. But we have to get this legislative action committee to be as active as the Board of Registration Committee is now. And so
when a national Indivisible endorses,
Yeah.
so we endorse a candidate, now they do, what does their endorsing the candidate do? What do they?
I don't know. It's a good question, and I'm sorry. I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I don't know. We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
So would we be endorsing candidates before the primaries, or would we,
Well, we don't-
or after the primaries?
We don't know that yet. Jill's actually working on a timeline for us. That's kind of back into this, and she's going to look at, here's the election date, here's the primary dates, and we have to do this amount of work. And backing up to today, do we have time to do candidates for primaries or not? We may not have enough time to do that. And there's arguments both ways. Do you want to endorse candidates at the primary, or do you want to wait till after the primary is over and then endorse a candidate? So different groups do different things, and we've got to hash that out as a team. So, your input on that would be greatly appreciated. It could go either way. Okay. All right. So let's see. What else? New business. We're transitioning communications directors. John Broydek is transitioning out, and Bailey Morrison is transitioning in. Over on the table, there's two cards, one for John to say thank you for getting us this far. He put up our website, he came up with our logo, he's done our brochures and our business cards. By the way, we've got business cards now, and they're over there on the table, so those are pretty cool. So he did a lot of stuff to make us look really, really spiffy, right? So, a thank you card for John, and then Bailey just graduated from SUNY Brockport, and so we've got a graduation card there for Bailey. So before you leave tonight, if you would just sign those cards for the two of them, I'm sure they would appreciate it. We're looking for a training coordinator. I've talked to a couple of folks about maybe taking this responsibility on. It could be shared between more than one person, but there's a link here that talks about what the training coordinator would do. And that person would have a seat on our coordinating committee, person or persons, and it would be a great opportunity for somebody to be active in the group and to contribute to some things we just haven't had the bandwidth to get to in terms of training for our group. Again, possible endorsement of candidates. On the 19th of May, which is just a few days from now, I think it's Saturday, there's training at the Monroe County Democratic Committee for taking petitions around for candidates who want to get on the ballot. So if you want to do that, you need to be trained first. So there's a link here, you can sign up, and they'll teach you whatever you need to know. And the first petitions go around starting on June 5th. So that could be an interesting adventure for somebody. On May 23rd, there's a town hall at the First Universalist Church on South Clinton for the New York Health Act. There's a bunch of New York Health Act stuff on the table over there. We have a liaison who isn't able to be here tonight to the group that represents Rochester area in the New York State Health Campaign. And so if you want to learn more about that, there's a town hall coming up on the 23rd.
And that conflicts with our.
With our legislative action. I know.
Because I'd like to be at both of them.
I know. But anyway. And we're now taking donations on our website. So in addition to our petty cash or cash donations, which we've got a box full over there on the table, we're looking up the page for doing donations on the website. So now, thank you to David for getting that hooked up this afternoon, and thank you for Jill for going through all of the organization is called Act Blue that we interface with. And you can set up recurring donations. I think it has to be done by credit card, Jill?
PayPal.
Okay, PayPal, yeah, okay. And we've set a goal for to raise $1,000, which would help us immensely with a bunch of the things that we're trying to do. So take a look at that. It's going to the page will right now it's on the home page. Eventually it will be like in its own tab that's called Donate or something like that. But till Bailey comes back from vacation, we haven't looked that up yet. But if you want, if your friends or relatives want to know, how can they help? Lead it to that site. We have voter registration training coming up on the 14th, right, John?
Yeah.
And that's going to be right here in this room. And this is being conducted by the Rochester Voters Alliance. Judy Schwartz, who was here a few months ago talking to us about voter registration. And she was so excited about all of the energy that we had around registering voters that they decided to register voters this year, which they don't normally do on an off year. But they had, our excitement was just too much to pass up. so Judy's going to do training again on the 14th that site.
And bring your calendars then, because you'll be able to sign up for slots.
Yeah.
Locations.
Right. Good. Okay. All right. Our meeting next month is on June 19th, remember the third Tuesday of every month. And we're going to have 3 people coming. They're going to speak for 15 or 20 minutes each. One from veterans, one from the teachers, and one from labor. And they're going to tell us what are the 1 or 2 key things that, as we look at candidates to endorse, what are the things that we want to be looking at in their positions for these 3 areas, right? And so we're going to tie that back into our endorsement process. We have some work going on with gun violence prevention. I made a lot of good contacts at the activism fair. And what we would like to do is get the student groups involved in an activity that Indivisible is trying to organize at a national level, specifically around Howard Nielsen, who's the NRA's favorite lawyer, who's up for a nomination for a lifetime federal judgeship in a Western district. Even though it's not our district, our senators will vote for that, and these organizations are nationwide. And so what we're trying to do is get something going here that we could spread across the nation that would be a campaign to oppose this nomination of this person to that bench. The timing on this is critical because as soon as Mitch McConnell knows he's got 50 votes for this guy, he's going to bring it to the floor, and then it'll be too late for us to do anything. So if you want to help us on that, let us know. You can always reach us by email at indivisiblerochester@gmail.com, or if you're on the Slack workspace, you can reach us there. And then last but not least, Mike is going to talk to us a little about T-shirts. He's graciously offered to purchase a few hundred T-shirts for us, right, that we can... I'll let you talk. Oh, yeah, that's right. That was dollars.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take 5 minutes of your time. I brought some shirts. There's a printer in Rochester who's I'd like to use. I tried a few vendors, and we print shirts for our neighborhood association. We print for schools, things like that. So I like this guy. He's got his own shop. He's blows glass and prints shirts. He's a real interesting guy. So I have some samples of the quality of the shirt. If you want to look at them, I'm not going to pass them around now. These are the kind of shirts they get in a different color. So if people have feelings about what color you would like, think about it, and we can, afterwards, we can take your vote for what color you'd like to see a t-shirt. I know there's going to be 50 different colors. I took a stab at artwork because, let's see, I'm not sure what is the
latest logo? We're trying to go with this, except that this doesn't have good contrast, so we're trying a few different things, and we haven't really landed on it yet. But yeah, that's the most recent.
Really not it. But I saw that. That's not, but that's close. So anyway, so I took that and I generated 3 different ways. Okay, you've got to do something with that. There's a blue on blue, so if you want a blue background, you can do something. And then then there's this white background thing. Okay, so it looks like that. So you can take a look at that. And then I took the liberty, and I knew we should talk to Bailey, where you can wrap it around the circle and make it bigger. So the questions then are, what color do you like a shirt? Would you like a background blue like this with these wrapped around it?
Yeah.
Okay, so with these choices, I'll leave them on the table.
Maybe, Mike, everybody could just vote for what they like, right? Just put a mark on the page that you like.
That's true. That's true.
Right?
Take a look, see if you like it, and check
Do
it.
an online vote on Slack.
And we can do another,
We could do that too.
Because
Yeah.
not everybody's here. Yeah.
Okay. That would work, especially the color of the shirt seems to be.
Right, does he
I
have,
thought we decided.
does he have a limited number of colors that he can offer us, or what's the deal on that?
He didn't say. I think he can get just about anything because we've had purple, we've had light blue, gray. Gray is you got to think about what shows up on what too.
Sure.
I saw some of the national ones. Holly had one when we were voting, and the printing is so big, you can't even tell where it is. So you've got to really get the size right. And there's women's sizes if you want to see the women's shirts are cut different.
Okay.
So there's the option to do those too in different sizes. And there's a large, a small, and these black ones here from our neighborhood are different sizes. Women's and men's, and they're kind of black, but to give you an idea what they would look like, extra large. And some people like them really large, and they wear them just, so whatever.
Great. Thanks. That's terrific. We're thinking about it. We haven't really landed on this either, but we're thinking about offering them as a premium for donations. So if you make a donation on the website, we'll keep track of that, but also keep track of it in case we roll that out. We want to get a t-shirt for your donation. All right, so more to come on t-shirts. Thanks, Mike. And the 50 t-shirts is an initiative of my office. Okay. All right, so I think that's everything. And so I want to turn this over to Chris Thomas and Aaron Frazier. So first I want to apologize that Christina Aaron isn't here. Christina lined this up with you guys, and her daughter was sick yesterday. Now Christina's sick today, so y'all know how that goes. And so she extended her apologies for not being here tonight. But let me introduce Chris Thomas, who is a trial lawyer at the law firm of Nixon Peabody. He's married to Kate Cerulli, who works at the University of Rochester on issues of diversity and inclusion. They have 2 sons who attend Brighton schools. Chris comes from a social justice background and is working this year to elect candidates who get it. Thank you, Chris. And Aaron Frazier is a trial attorney at the law firm of Harris Beach. He works on a variety of cases for corporate and governmental clients in the areas of constitutional law, civil rights law, contract law, employment law, intellectual property, defamation law, and business ethics. Aaron also regularly represents indigent clients in family court for free. He's a Rochester native, a graduate of the Rochester City School District, and a first-generation college graduate. Aaron holds degrees from Harvard University and Cornell University. He's affiliated with a number of organizations that serve vulnerable populations and youth. Aaron's working with the Democratic Party this year to help get progressive and diverse people elected. And that's what they're going to talk to us about tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Chris. This is Aaron. And I think what we'll do is to sort of start broadly and then kind of focus. And by broadly, I mean why we're doing what we're doing, what motivated it, and then sort of get down to some of the specifics of what we're doing. And Aaron and I are pretty good at dog and ponying, and so we'll bounce back and forth, and invariably we interrupt one another respectfully, and sometimes not so respectfully. I do it not so respectfully, he does it respectfully. So I think probably like you all, after the election of President Trump, I had sort of personally almost a crisis of faith, and funny, it reminded me, you're way too young to remember this, it reminded me of the night that Ronald Reagan got elected. I mean, I had that same pit in my stomach about it. And then of course, through the course of the last year, just so many of the vile statements that have been made, the utterly racist things that have been coming out of the administration and the administration's supporters just served as much more than a stone in my shoe. It was like a boulder in my shoe, and I felt it, and I felt it, and I felt it, and finally I said to myself, I gotta do something, and I can't just sit here and, curse at the stars. I have to do something. And I started thinking to myself, well, what can I do? And, where can I do it? And, I have been involved in the Monroe County Democratic Committee, sometimes closely, sometimes from afar, for probably 10 years. And, or look, maybe even more than that. And I've always been dismayed by our inability to get diverse candidates elected to the state court bench, and that means basically anything above city court. So over at the Hall of Justice on the state court side, you got city court. That hears what are called misdemeanors and violations and some small civil stuff. And then above that, and that's a very diverse court actually. We're pleased with how diverse it is. And it's a completely democratic court because it's only voted on by people who live in the city. So the Republicans don't even run candidates for city court. But then above that, you've got family court, you've got county court, and you've got state Supreme Court. All three of those are trial courts of one sort or another. And the Republicans and the conservatives totally and completely dominate those courts to the extent that except for county court, we've got a couple of Democrats who've been elected to county court, all white. And we have, but there are no people of color who are on family court. There are no people of color who are on state Supreme Court. And there are no people of color on county court. That said, there is pretty good gender representation on all of those courts. So, kind of thinking locally, I thought to myself, why don't we try to do something about this year? And about diversifying, and I figured, why don't we start with family court? And the reason I thought that is that I'm in the midst of a case that's become really disturbing for me in family court. It's a case I've taken on pro bono, and it involves the parental rights of a same-sex couple, where the highly conservative judge wants to hear nothing about it. And my client, who has literally raised this baby since the first trimester, but is not a biological parent and is not an adoptive parent, but is, without any question, the most stable parent in this child's life, is about to lose basic, contact with this child, all to the child's detriment. And I said to myself, this is wrong, and this is something, and it happens to be, my client happens to be African American, and it got me thinking that this was the place to put the marker down. This was the place where, I wanted to try to make a difference. And one of the things, the first thing I did, and this is because Aaron and I have been friends since he was the president of the Rochester Black Bar Association, is that I called Aaron and said to Aaron, is this something you think you might be interested in? And of course, without missing a beat, he said, I'm on. So what we've been doing over the course of the last several months is trying to develop a strategy that will help us to help our candidates overcome the lack of financing that we have. The Republicans and the conservatives, because they literally own every position, every paid position that's over at the Hall of Justice. And what regular folks don't realize is that when the Republicans and the conservatives send out their fundraiser requests, it's really, at least in my opinion, exactly how it used to happen in Tammany Hall. You want your job, you're going to kick some money back to the party. And as a result of that, they're able to fund their candidates in a way that the Democrats simply can't. And simply, I blame not just myself, but leadership for not having fought for these judicial positions. The reason I mentioned the case that I'm working on is that it underscores for me the absolute importance of family court. I mean, it's dealing with the only thing that we ultimately all really care about, families. I mean, as between, some commercial dispute you might be having with, a vendor that you're dealing with, or your kids, what court do you think you're going to care more about? Family court. And this is, if Aaron, you could take a minute to talk about that importance from your perspective and what you observed, I'd appreciate it.
So I want to start with how I kind of got involved in this whole thing. So as Chris said, I was an officer in the Rochester Black Bar Association, and that was in 2013 through 2015. And we held several meetings and had some discussions, and I even wrote a whole op-ed about the problem of the lack of judicial diversity in Monroe County. This is actually my first year getting political, getting involved with the party. I've been a registered Dem since I was 18. This is my first year actually getting involved, thanks to Chris's invitation. But I just want, before I jump into my discussion, I want to just give you some perspective on what our courts actually look like around here, and I want to dive a bit deeper into that. So Chris said the city court is pretty diverse. City court consists of 10 judges, 5 men, 5 women, 4 black, 2 Latin, 4 white. There's even a member of the LGBTQ community on the city court bench. County court, we have a couple of Democrats. Supreme Court, we have a couple of Democrats, and there's even a member of the LGBTQ community on Supreme Court. When you get to family court, we have currently 7 judges, 6 Republicans, 1 Democrat. All but one of them live in the suburbs. They're all Caucasian. As you heard earlier, I practice in family court pretty regularly through pro bono, representing indigent clients for free through a program called Volunteer Legal Services Project. So I'm in there probably a couple of times a month on various cases. And a lot of the people, the court system doesn't keep statistics on the ethnicities of the people who come through family court, but the way they arrange family court, they have all of the litigants sitting out in the courtroom, and there's this hallway in the building. And you can just walk down that hallway, and you can see who's out there waiting for their cases to be called. And it is substantially minorities and urban residents. And when they go into the courtroom, the first thing that they see is an all-white courtroom. And I just don't mean the judges. It's often the deputies, the court staff, and that terrifies them. And I'm telling you this as an attorney who's had these conversations with my clients. And it's not some irrational fear. And I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir because I know that the fact that you're in this room, you understand the importance of this issue. And before I go any further, I would be remiss not to thank you all for having us, one, and for two, for all the work that you do in this organization and that you've done outside of this organization in your various careers and lives, because it's important work, and that's one of the things that we want to acknowledge up front, that what we're trying to do is building on the energy and the network that you've established. So going back to family court. As Chris said, and it is obvious from the title of that court, what they are deciding is the composition of families, the family circumstances that are going to be most conducive to the success of a particular child. And an analogy that I like to use when explaining the importance of having diversity, and especially a court like family court, is this: very simple. You can't understand the high school curriculum without a middle school curriculum. So my point is that the stuff that you are faced with as a family court judge is sometimes not even fully intelligible to you if you have not lived that life experience. And that's not to say that a white judge can't effectively preside over a family court case involving a black family. What that is saying is that that judge will probably have some blind spots that a more diverse judge probably would not. Judges are not robots. They don't simply call balls and strikes, and that is a common fiction that I think the legal profession has perpetrated, and then media and pop culture has perpetrated as well. You look on TV and you see these judges in movies where it's these stoic, emotionless figures. That's not real life. Judges are human beings who bring their life experiences and preconceptions and prior considered judgments to the bench. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing, I think, that you have judges using not only their mind but their heart to decide these cases. Because that there are all these ethical rules that govern judicial campaigns, you rarely see, at least around here, judges campaigning to get elected using racism, blatant, explicit racism as a campaign device, not in like you would see in some executive or legislative races. What you usually see around here are judges who get elected and they just come with certain blind spots. Like we all have blind spots, we're all human. But what I'm seeing in my cases is that these blind spots can be just as pernicious as blatant, explicit racism. Judges who do not only lack a certain cultural competency, but don't understand and don't know that they lack it. I want to give you an example of some of the things that I've observed, not just in family court, but in various courts in the time that I've been practicing. When I was a law student, I watched a judge sentence a black man who had been convicted of raping a white woman. And at sentencing, the judge called this man the face of evil. Now, I knew right then and there what was going to happen as a result of that. And some of you might already be ahead of me, but what happened was, as I predicted, the media latched onto that. So they took this black man's face, put it on TV in the newspaper, and then the narrative was face of evil. This is the kind of behavior that just perpetuates the demonization of black faces. And that's something that me, as a law student, immediately realized was going to happen. And that's something that I think that more diverse candidates sitting in black rows will be more cognizant of and be much more careful in their official pronouncements. There's another popular story going around where, in another criminal court story, and out of respect and out of ethics, I'm not going to name any of these judges because lawyers are forbidden from disparaging judges openly like that. But there was a case where a judge criticized a woman for not paying a fine, and her excuse for not paying a fine by a certain date was that she just didn't have the money. Well, she came to court and she had a nice hairdo. And the judge, well, you got all this money to get your hair done all fancy, why can't you pay this fine? Well, in the African American community, it's quite common to have black women doing each other's hair for free on the porch on a Sunday morning or something like that. This is the kind of cultural blind spot that can have really pernicious effects. So these are just a few examples. Now, in family court, we often see judges and magistrates. That's another important. There are only 7 judges, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that come through family court every year. And the 7 judges that we have cannot possibly adjudicate all those cases in a timely fashion. So they're authorized to hire magistrates and referees to help them. And we also have a diversity problem there. We have probably, I believe, about a dozen court attorney referees and magistrates, and only one of which is diverse. So even there, you have these situations that no matter where you go in family court to have your case presided, you're having only one particular experience on the bench. Now, family court is so important because what they're doing there is they're deciding the best interest of the child. That's the magic word. That's the magic legal standard. So in criminal court, you have reasonable doubt. In family court, you have what is in the best interest of this child. So family court, they decide obviously things like child custody, paternity, visitation, child support. They also decide what's called family offense cases, which is a civil counterpart for domestic violence court, for criminal domestic violence court. So if you're having a circumstance of domestic violence, you can immediately go into family court, family offense court, and get an order of protection and various other remedies that are designed not necessarily to punish the offender, but just to protect the victim in the family offense case. You also have juvenile delinquency cases, abuse and neglect cases, and what's called persons in need of supervision, where people can go in and get the government to help out with a particular youth who's having trouble in school or in the community. Like Chris said earlier, family, that's the most important thing. That's what's going to decide the difference between who's going to grow up to be a productive member of our society and who's going to end up in a much more tragic circumstances. And we've all seen time and time again in this community what can happen when you have people in power with the power to do something, but who don't have the required skill set. So the thing that brought Chris and I together, and so many other people on our committee this year, is this shared belief in the power of diversity. And I want to emphasize that we're not saying that the judges on the bench now are horrible or that Caucasian people can't be good judges. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that there's something so beautiful that happens with diversity, and that is the destruction of groupthink. Groupthink is what really causes a lot of bad problems in the courtroom, because you have people who just don't have that life experience. They have these preconceptions that have not been challenged. And by getting a diverse candidates in these judgeships, not only do you have a new perspective on the bench in the courtroom, but behind the scenes you have somebody talking to these other judges, bringing a new life experience, helping them to understand, helping them to learn how to interpret certain things that they might see in the courtroom that they had no reference point in their own life experience. Here's another good example. So there are no juries in family court. So the judge is both the decider, the interpreter of the law and the facts. So the judge decides what witness I'm going to believe on the stand and why. And if you just ask yourself, you don't even have to get into the social scientists and the psychologists, just ask yourself, how do we decide who's credible? We resort to what's called heuristic. We take mental shortcuts. That's just what it means to be human. And studies have shown us that people are more likely to believe somebody who looks like them. So when you have a judge on the stand who has no prior experience with an individual, they need to make a snap judgment about how they're going to interpret that person's testimony. They're not going to be able to help but look at this person's attire, look at their mannerisms. And if that's foreign to them, it is so easy to write that person off as not credible. So that's just another example of why this is so important.
The nature of our system is that our judges it's a totally political system. This is not a merit selection system. I've got a lot of family in New Zealand, and a bunch of them are lawyers, and a couple of them are judges, and that's a pure merit selection process, and they are continually amazed that we do this by the elective process, and it's driven by the political parties. It's the system that we have. In a lot of ways, it works out fairly well. but what we're getting are people who have been pre-approved by political parties that have certain perspectives. So in family court, even though there happens to be out of the 7, one who's a Democrat, they're all big C conservatives. And you don't get the big C, in my opinion, conservative nomination unless you hold certain opinions and hold certain perspectives and you're willing, at least in my opinion, to jump through certain hoops. Aaron's not speaking, Aaron's not taking that position, I am. But that is troubling to me. It's the system that we have, but it's troubling to me that all of the judges are big C conservatives, all but one are Republicans, and frankly, the one who's the Democrat is the most conservative of them all. And it's one of these situations where we sat down and we said, where can we make a difference? And we decided that the stake in the ground that we're going to try to put down this year is this really historical opportunity to have elected the first African American women to the Monroe County Family Court bench. Aaron and I and the 2 candidates, Zalika Shepard and Fatima Reed, appeared on WXXI's Need to Know program with Helen Bianduti Hofer a couple of weeks ago, and made the case for why this is important, why it matters to regular people, why it matters to the litigants who are coming through family court. And one of the points that Aaron made was that there hasn't been an African American on the family court bench in 35 years. There was an eminent jurist named Charles Willis, beloved by all, who was on family court for many years, but never an African American woman. And Bill Riley was asked for comment, and his response was, well, no one's ever come forward. That's what we're talking about. The Republicans and conservatives are just unbelievably effective at developing their judicial bench. And, so if you go out into any of the towns, with the exception of Brighton and Irondequoit, all of the town court judges that you're appearing in front of are Republicans, and most of them are conservatives. Those town courts are easy entrant points for someone to learn, to get the moniker of judge and then to be able to run for a higher office. They actively seek those people out in order to groom them for higher office. We're horrible at that, simply because the towns are primarily Republican, with the exception of Brighton, which has 2 Democratic judges. Irondequoit has 3, and that's all good. And the idea that out of all of the African American lawyers who live and work in Monroe County, they haven't ever been able to find one that they could dare to get behind, or that they could get behind and put up onto the bench and then move to higher levels, underscores the corruption of that process from a diversity perspective.
Or at the very least, complacency.
You notice the difference here.
Chris is exactly right. Having spent so much time in the Rochester Black Bar Association, I know virtually all of the black lawyers and judges who work in Monroe County, and we're not all Democrats. We're not. There are quite a few conservative African American attorneys, but none have been approached by the Republican or the conservative parties, which is interesting.
And so, one of the things that we did, and actually Louise Slaughter asked me to do it. And I'm not even, my accent is so bad. I automatically want to do my Louise accent. I'm not going to do it. She asked me if I would breathe new life into the old Lawyers Committee. And so there was a Lawyers Committee inside Monroe County Democratic Committee. And I think, Shay, you might have been, were you on it back in the day? No, okay. Well, that makes sense because you're female, and you know, I pulled out the old list, and as Aaron has heard me say before, I was the most diverse and youngest person on the list. You know, it's like, okay, something's wrong here. And so what we did was to basically strip out a lot of the the folks who were not diverse, and who we also knew might not buy into this new process. And we have brought in people who are registered Democrats. That's the one requirement. They needed to be registered Democrats, but we purposely have avoided bringing in the usual suspects, the usual Democratic lawyers. So we've got this committee now, and we've probably got 30 members on it, and it's an active committee. Not all 30 are active at the exact same time, but people are active in it. It is diverse from a gender perspective, an age perspective, and a race and ethnicity perspective. And none of the members, well, just a few of the members are of the usual suspects, but all are engaged and all are progressive. And all are really interested in making this historical event occur this year. And so while Aaron and I were bringing this committee together and sort of talking through what some of the issues might be for this year, meanwhile, one of the women who is running was already developing her campaign on a parallel and not connected pathway with our organization. And why don't you tell the story about Zalika and about Fatima?
Sure. So now we're at the point in our presentation where we're start talking about this year and what the ask is, right? Because all we're going to. So we've got two candidates running for two open seats in family court. So both of our candidates could hypothetically win and will win with all of the efforts and energy that we're trying to bring together, and with your wonderful help as well. There are no incumbents, so we got a real shot at this. These are two completely open seats. The Republicans, they're running two candidates as well. Now, our candidates are Zalika Shepard and Fatima Reed, and we'll get you information about their respective campaigns and campaign websites. Zalika Shepard currently works for the county law department. She's in family court. She's in their family court unit, and she's in family court practicing every day. She does child visitation, child paternity, and child, just the paternity and the child support cases. She's been with the county law department for about a year. Prior to that, she was an assistant district attorney at the Monroe County DA's office, working in their domestic violence bureau. So this is something that she's been pretty much doing her entire career. I believe she's been practicing about 8 years, 8 to 10 years.
Let me just interrupt you on that point. So anybody who pays attention to how the Republicans run the patronage machine over there knows that for an employee of the county to be running on the Democratic ticket is an extremely bold move. Right. And
I've dealt with that issue.
Shay was with the county for a number of years and knows that issue. I mean, she didn't get fired, but knows that issue very well.
I was told I had to change my party registration in order to keep my job.
Yeah.
Wow.
They play.
They looked it up.
They play for keeps. They play for keeps. It's no fooling around. And so when Zalika, who was an employee of Sandy Dorley and the county district attorney, who is Republican, and now the county law department, which is Republican, for her to stand up and to say, now's the time, and I'm the candidate, is an extremely bold move. And to me, it speaks volumes about her character, and she's got just sort of a quiet strength to her where you can see that she's not someone to be trifled with. And so I'm so impressed by that. I just wanted to put that out there.
Absolutely, and it's a good point. And it's if you know Zulika at all, you know that it's not surprising because she's bold. She does have a very quiet strength to her. She's somewhat of a reserved character, but she does have a lot of charisma as well. When I interned at the DA's office a few years ago, before I graduated law school, and I did work there simultaneously with Zulika. And one of the things that really amazed me about her is that defense attorneys loved her. And it's rare that you find a defense attorney who loves the prosecutor that they're dealing with. And they loved her because she was tough but very fair. She took into account the situations and life experiences that brought defendants into the courtroom. And she wasn't just trying to get high convictions and high sentences. She was actually trying to get people the help they needed so that they can go on to live productive lives. And that's one of the reasons why I think, and many agree with me, that she will make an excellent family court judge, because it's not just about statistics or a paycheck for her. She wants to do what's right, and she's done what's right her entire career. In terms of her background, she was born, raised in the city of Rochester. She was raised by a single mom. She's a graduate of the Rochester City School District. So this is her home. She's here. She's been working in this community for most of her career. I think she did work in Albany for a little while. A few months, I believe, and then she came back home, came back to Rochester. And this is where she's been practicing law. This is where she's been serving clients and the public. Our other candidate, Fatima Reed,
Can I just interrupt you?
Sure.
I think there's another thing that tells the life story about Zulika is that her father, and she speaks openly about this, was addicted to drugs and wasn't around, and was raised in a single parent home, and managed to push through to not just graduate, but graduate and go on to a prestigious law school. And I think with that background and experience, not for nothing, there's a lot of people coming through family court that have that same kind of background. I think that to me that spoke even more loudly about the diversity of this candidate. It's not just an ethnicity thing. It's not just that she's got dynamite credentials that are just sing off the page, but she's also lived a life.
took the wind out of my sails. I was going to wrap around.
Oh, sorry.
We got to work on
Yeah, we got to work on transitions.
No, it's a great point because, just to put Chris's point in a nutshell, when Zulika becomes a family court judge, the stories that she'll hear in family court won't be theoretical for her. She's lived through it. So she can see things and make inferences that, as I said earlier, somebody with that blind spot cannot. And that will produce a much higher quality of justice. Our second candidate, Fatima Reed, she's currently the Chief of Staff for the Rochester City School District. She's been in that post for about a year and a half, I believe. Prior to that, she was an attorney for the Rochester City School District, handling their contracts and litigation. Prior to that, she was an attorney for the City of Rochester, handling the city's contracts and litigation. And prior to that, she was in private practice as a litigator at Davidson Fink. So she's quite skilled and quite experienced as well, and she also has a dynamic personal story. Although born in the United States, her family is Nigerian, and shortly after her birth, they went back to Nigeria, and then they came back here when she was about 8 years old to California, not specifically Rochester. But when she went to California, her family had their own issues as well, and she ended up going through the family court system out in California, her and her sister, and it is it's standard within Nigerian culture that the firstborn, the oldest, speaks for the other children. And that's what Fatima did. She was the firstborn. She often, when a family first started going through the system in California, when they first had to go to family court, she would speak to the attorneys, speak to the social workers and stuff like that. And the judge had a problem with that Fatima was sort of being the guardian for her little sister. And the judge actually separated her, put them in different foster care places for that reason alone.
Yeah, misperceiving that aspect of their culture for and basically, I guess, an un-American domineering nature.
Right.
Because God knows we're not domineering.
Right. So again, just to bring the point home, when Fatima becomes a family court judge, this will not be theoretical for her. She's lived it. She's actually been through the system. She knows what it's like to be that scared kid, wondering what that man in that black dress is going to do to my family. You know, when I say the dress things, I've worked on a case where a kid, why is that man wearing a dress? They don't know what it was. And it was cute to me, but I love that story because it brings home how they don't know what's going on. They're terrified. And it means so much more, especially to the parents, but the kids too, because kids are smart. And and when the family circumstances is so bad, the parents have no choice but to bring the kid to family court because they can't get a sitter, they don't have the money and stuff like that. Like I see these kids' faces and I talk to my clients, and it means so much more when they walk into the courtroom and they see somebody who looks like them. And they won't just get that with Fatima who's legal, but they'll get somebody who has been in their shoes, who know their stories, who know the streets that they're living in, who know the issues with which they are contending. And that's something that the Republicans simply cannot do this year.
Could you tell them about what Pat said about...
Yes. Pat Gallagher, Patricia Gallagher, she's a retired family court judge, one of the few Democrats to get elected to that post in recent years. She recently retired, and we've had many strategy sessions and discussions with her to gain her immense wisdom and experience on this issue in terms of getting elected to family court and making sure that court serves everybody equally. And one of the things that she often tells us and other people who ask her about this issue is that she's a white woman. But one of the things that she saw from the bench is that when minorities would come into her courtroom as litigants, they looked at her black deputy. She was assigned an African-American woman as her court deputy, and she said that she could feel the sigh of relief when minority litigants would come into her courtroom, look at her, and then look at the black deputy beside her. And she could feel, it was almost as if she could read their mind, and they were saying, well, we got this white lady here. She may not necessarily understand her life experience, but at least she's friendly with somebody who might. At least she knows somebody who might be able, offline or whatever, to represent the issues that affect my life in ways that we can't necessarily prove in a courtroom, or ways that we can't necessarily show in a courtroom. So that's something that matters. So not only the black judges, that's probably the biggest piece, obviously the judges are deciding these cases, but diversity across the board in the courtroom, and the judges have a role to play in that, as I said earlier, who gets these magistrate roles, who gets appointments to family court cases, who gets assigned family court cases, judges have the power to do that. And then judges and deputies and court staff. Judges have some role in those hirings and those assignments and stuff like that.
So, just a couple of short asides here. I had the privilege of nominating Fatima at the Brighton Democratic Committee meeting. I'm a member of the Brighton Democratic Committee. And it was great because Bill Maley, the supervisor of Brighton, completely unprompted, stood up, and it was, with Bill, it's stood up. And he said, I want everyone in this room to know, it's a packed room at the Brighton Democratic Committee. There's like 70 people in there. He said, I want everyone to know that Fatima, when she was working at Davidson Fink for this eminent lawyer named Tom Fink, would do all of the tax assessment work, legal work, for the town of Brighton. And he said, bar none, first of all, with all respect to Tom Fink, she did all the work, and secondly, it was unbelievably high quality work. And to hear a Williams, and I think he went to UPenn for law school, that's Bill Maley, he's no dummy, complimenting the work of Fatima as being the highest quality he has ever seen spoke volumes to me. But that's just sort of a little bit of an aside. So what we did was we brought together this committee of lawyers. It's progressives. They are people who are registered with the party, but they're not party regulars. I like to say that this committee that Aaron and I have pulled together is in the party, but it's not of the party. None of the quote-unquote leaders, none of the electeds are putting their thumb on us because they can't. We don't have jobs through them. We don't have, patronage that we get through them. We're doing this because this is what we care about. And one of the committee members, well, more than one, but one in particular, Jill Paperno, said, Chris, have you thought about reaching out to Indivisible? And I was like, what's Indivisible? And so she told me what Indivisible was, and so I said, that makes perfect sense, because I think what we really want and need to do is to try to develop a countywide, it's a countywide race, a countywide web of people who get it, who understand the value of diversity, particularly in this setting, and start talking to them. We can't remain in our little Monroe County Democratic, silo. You all are clearly not staying in a silo after, hearing Mary's presentation there. And through the summit that we did last week, where we brought Dawn and Mary brought the leaders in of progressive groups from across the county, we are trying to do what I think, I'll just speak from my opinion, progressives aren't particularly good at doing, being coordinated and, pressing our message out from beyond the silo that we're operating in. And so for me, it made perfect sense to meet with Indivisible, and Aaron and I had that meeting with Dawn and Mary, 6 weeks ago maybe, as an initial meeting, and we just clicked like this, and the summit then happened. I think the summit couldn't have gone any better, and whether or not this group and the other groups that were at the summit decide to get involved in this particular campaign or not, I hope everyone does, it is incredibly effective to have these linkages being formed so that we can start developing action items to accomplish the things that we want to all accomplish. From my perspective, I'm thinking super locally, and I'm thinking short term. This election is over on November 7th. We'll know if we've won or lost on November 7th, and that's something that I like about it, is that there are absolutely definite action items that we can do. There are markers that we can hit in terms of voters to be registered, calls to make, getting people to the polls. I mean, the real nuts and bolts of campaigning, and it can be done either individually or in a web of the kind that we're talking about, including with MCDC if people so want to. We are going to be working very closely with whomever is the party's nominee for the 25th judicial. We will work as closely as we can with whoever ends up being the nominee for the Attorney General's position, whoever with the governor, because all of that will advance the goal that we have, which is to get these two women elected to the family court bench. And it only makes sense for us to get in the slipstream, if you will, of what will be, regardless of who wins the primary for the 25th, a very well-funded effort. Because the bottom line is the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, is not going to allow this seat to go to a Trump-supporting Republican without a big fight. And that means that there's going to be dollars coming this way. Dollars to do what? Dollars to buy phones and minutes on phones that can be used to say, would you please support our candidate X, and oh, by the way, go to the polls to support our family court candidates Fatima and Zuleika. So that's why we are working closely with MCDC. Jamie Romeo, who's the chair of the party, is all in. For the first time ever, and it's because of our effort, MCDC is actually putting money towards a family court race. Well, in any judicial race, it never gives money to judicial races, and that blows people away. What do you mean the party doesn't give the candidates money? How do you win? Well, guess what? We don't win. We don't win because the party is so weakened by virtue of the fact that the Republicans own the Hall of Justice. They own the Hall of Justice, they own all the jobs over there, and they own the Executive Office building, and because they own the Executive Office building and the Hall of Justice, they are able to raise tons of money out of the employees of the Hall of Justice, and they're also able to raise tons of money from the engineering companies and the contracting companies that do work with the county. It's a little thing that some people would call pay to play, and there's been plenty of conversation about that over the course of the years, but that's why they can fund their candidates. That's why they continue to own the Hall of Justice and the Executive building. But we got to start somewhere. And I believe that in this year, with this president tweeting the crap that he continues to tweet, that it's the reason that, well, I know it's the reason that I'm standing here on an evening, and I'm going to bet that one of the reasons that you guys are here too, and it's something that you might want to become involved in. Obviously, you've got lots of different issues that you are involved in, but this is one that you may want to consider as well.
So we'll wrap up. So we'll let you ask any questions that you might have. But I just want to, in closing, say that I talk about an ask. The ask is simply this: that we work together. I think we all have our causes that we champion, the issues that are near and dear to our respective hearts. But I think the most basic thing that we all can do to advance all of our unique respective interests is get the right people elected. And there is a lot of energy behind Zuleika Shepherd and Fatima Reed. And the energy that we see already forming, combined with yours, will bring a lot of people out to the polls, a lot of people voting for our candidates, and a lot of people voting for the candidates that will most advance the issues that you all care about. So we just want to work together. And that can mean just simply spreading the word, getting people registered, donating to the campaigns, $20, that would be enough. A bunch of donations of $20 from a ton of people would help. Larger donations obviously won't be turned away. Phone calling, knocking on doors, canvassing, the great petition training and stuff like that. Anything that you all can do would be very much appreciated because this is such an important issue.
Emily, before you ask your question, can I tell one last story? So about 4 weeks ago, I was contacted directly and personally by two very, very highly placed emissaries of the Republicans and the Conservatives. You know what they said to me? They offered me a deal. And the deal was that they would appoint a male, that they would cross-endorse the Democrats' candidate for Supreme Court. Oh, well, that sounds great. Why don't you do that? Our candidate for Supreme Court, that particular person that you're talking about, would be a terrific Supreme Court judge. Okay, Chris, but there's an ask. And, oh, really? Well, what's the hook? Your two family court women have to drop out. Swear to God, as God is my witness, two separate emissaries of the Republicans and the Conservatives, and hit it hard. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And it literally underscores exactly what we're saying here. They have no interest in diversity on the family court bench. For them, it's all a power play about getting two of their people into two open spots. And in my opinion, that means that will ensure campaign contributions going forward, and also is, in my opinion, payoff for having stood in the Republican line and the Conservative line, and you've waited long enough, and now it's your turn. we're going to cut a deal to get these black women out of the way. To me, it was outrageous, and I said, that's not happening. And, of course, both of our candidates yeah, that's not happening.
In my opinion, the Republicans and the conservatives were a bit scared about the energy that we've already generated. So that if we can win, we can finally have a fighting chance at winning. So that's how I interpreted that. The final point that I want to make before we turn it over for questions and let you all get home to your families is this. If all of the incumbent family court judges complete their terms, they don't resign or retire or move up to higher office, there will not be another family court race until 2023. So this is our one shot for the next 5 years. That's another reason why this is so important.
So it remains completely conservative. And, the reason I focus on conservative is that, that's where, I think the constituents who go through family court are hurt the most. There is simply no doubt that in family court, family law is the area of law in New York State right now that is evolving most rapidly. And over the last 2 years, our highest court has said that the definition of parent is something that is open for legal analysis. And when you have all conservative judges on the bench, you don't even get cases that are litigated in order to go up for further analysis by appellate courts. As a result, we have this radically conservative family court bench. And is it surprising that the cases that are beginning to work their way up to the highest court in New York State, the Court of Appeals, are all coming from downstate? Of course it's not surprising, because we've got judges downstate who are willing to listen to the dictates of New York's highest court, which has said to judges at the trial court level, this is a new and evolving area. Bring us the cases with the new and evolving facts, and we will decide whether that is something that is going to be recognized in New York State or not. Our bench is so big C and small c conservative that those cases don't even get adjudicated.
You guys are taking I've heard you twice now, and my question is, we're going to help you. There's no question about that. But who else can we get you in front of? I mean, who do you want to get to that you haven't been able to, haven't had an entree?
The only reason we knew about you is that Jill told us. And so we need you to do that thinking for us, because, we're kind of like this, and I think that summit was gargantuan in terms of bringing a lot of people in.
But I think that's leading to the next step, getting the candidates in front
Absolutely.
of as many different groups as we can.
Absolutely.
So that, whatever that's a vacation, that would be first.
Yeah. And some of us can start while she's on
Yeah.
vacation.
And
We'll think about that.
what is so great, and I know that I'll just speak for the Brighton Committee, because that's where I've seen them present on a couple of different occasions. The Brighton Committee, just wanted to carry them out on, I don't know what they carry people out on, but But just so excited about the possibility of doing something that is so obviously right. And I think that same energy is playing out across the various Democratic committees. They have. I think they have. Yeah. And in the city LDs. So that's what I think that is the next stage. Is I guess we're just sort of advanced guys. We're not the exciting ones. We're not the ones that are going to make the history. But I think we would ask you all to think about who else we ought to be getting them in front of. And as importantly, how do we push that message out? So we have a subcommittee that we've created inside our lawyers committee that is focused on social media. And it, of course, mostly, younger, hipper, cooler people than me. They're more like Aaron. Aaron's on that committee. And, they've got followers on Twitter, and they've got friends on Facebook, and we're trying to push this message out through social media. So to the extent that we can get connected with people who have social media profiles, so to the extent that, you all use Facebook, who do you follow? Who do you friend? Let us know about that as well, because if they are people that are like-minded, well, that's an avenue for getting the message out without spending a ton of money.
Hi. You might have gone into this to some extent, but what's the normal process for fundraising for judicial and especially Democratic judicial candidates? And is there any way can help facilitate that or point it towards other organizations that can help draw funds, particularly to candidates like this?
Historically, candidates have been on their own. Historically, the party hasn't.
Yeah, I figured from what you were saying that was the case.
This year, we are laying some brand new infrastructure. We are trying to create new traditions within the party, but the party is actually going to help the candidates coordinate and implement and execute great fundraisers. We've done several meet and greet / fundraisers with the candidates so far, as people opening up their houses. So that's a great opportunity there. So if you know somebody who has a very nice sized house and they have a good following, and you think they might be receptive to what we're trying to do, let us know that person's name and we'll definitely reach out to them to see if we can get a house party there. Also, as Chris said earlier, social media has provided a world of opportunities on this sort of issue. And as just an example of the type of synergy that we're looking for, after the summit that we held last week, Chris and I, did you know Matt before that? Mm-hmm. Yes. Chris and I both met a gentleman named Matthew Brown. And over the weekend, he did this incredible Facebook post supporting our candidates and talking about family court, and then linking to their candidate websites and giving information about how to make a donation. He combined all of the pictures of the current sitting family court bench, all older, or not necessarily older, but all white men and women, and he made the visual.
It was great.
It was
unbelievable.
His Facebook page is public, so if you find him, Matthew Brown.
Yeah, he's in Action Together Rochester.
Yes. But it was just an absolutely brilliant post. I think it's been shared probably at least 50 times when I looked at it this morning.
But it needs to be shared 500 times.
Right. And it will. I mean, it's only been up for a day or two, I believe, and it's already gotten that many shares and likes and stuff like that. It's just beautiful. Like he's got some talent there in terms of messaging because.
And he also happens to be a medical doctor.
Yes.
And he's running for an office in his town.
Yeah. Right. So that's just an example. So creating things like that, that's the sort of thing that can really help get our candidates across the finish line.
A point that Aaron's made a few times is that most people, if you ask people out on the street, is Monroe County Family Court an all-white court? People go, how could it be? It couldn't be. I mean, this community is way more diverse than that. Is it an all-conservative court? No, how could it be? There's so many Democrats in this town. None of us know about it unless you're paying a lot of attention to it. And I think when that story starts to get told, people are like, really? That doesn't make sense. That's not right. And I think that, Matt's post does a great job of sort of highlighting that.
How do you spell Zuleika?
Zuleika.
And what's her last name?
Shepherd.
One Shepherd.
Yeah. 1PARD.
And Fatma's name?
Chris, would you think that the two candidates could do a program on, do one of Evan Dawson's
He's committed to doing it. Yeah.
It'll likely be closer to election day, just to have the light.
And what we did was Aaron and I did was to take the clip from the Need to Know program and tweeted it, posted it to Facebook, and it got circulated a fair amount. And what we're trying to do is the strategy that we have. It's not neither of us are political people or campaign people. Is trying to do free media up front. And pushing that free media out as much as we can. So to the extent that you all, I'm Chris Thomas. Mine's a public Facebook page, and that Need to Know clip is on there. And if we can get that pushed out by as many people. And as many times, it'll start to filter through to folks that, one, this is an issue, and two, we've got a solution. And then hopefully we'll be able to raise enough money between now and October that we'll actually be able to buy a fair amount of radio time on WDKX and over on, and probably have to do some TV. TV is ridiculously expensive. And frankly, it goes so far beyond Monroe County that kind of wasting. But it's what you got to do.
It, so
and that's part of how they win.
What's the rough budget for something like that?
Usually for countywide judicial races, it's about $100,000.
Yeah,
that's what you want to raise.
Yeah. Did you know that? That's a fairly modest. A lot of people say you need 150 or you're not going to be competitive. Now we're hoping that we're going to have this blue wave, and that people are going to turn out because they're outraged about what's going on at the top of the ticket or at the in Washington, and that we'll get some boost from that. But all you got to do is go to the Board of Elections annual canvass to see that we suck at turning out for voting at anything other than presidential races. And we got to stop that. And that's why I think the registration portion is so important, and that's why the phone banking is going to be so important. A lot of it's going to be going on at MCDC. Some folks who were at the summit last week were talking about how effective that has been for Indivisible. Alan was talking about making phone calls down to in support of the Doug Jones race, and Arizona, and we can do that right here. So we have to be more grassrootsy because we're not going to be coming in with the $200,000 of media spend. We just know that we won't.
Is this the type of issue that might help improve voter turnout
Yes.
in the city?
Yes.
Because I don't imagine people whose lives are affected by this are going to say, oh, that actually matters.
Yes.
What those other people are
Yes.
talking about does not affect my daily
Yes.
life, but this, you got to think. I mean,
Yes.
and that can be a way in which, when we're working on voter registration and voter turnout, say, like, look, there's these other things happening, but listen to this. This is really important. This is something that you and people in your life might be affected by. Let's come out to vote so we can make this thing.
100%.
I mean, that's got to be.
There's
Because that, we had, when we come to the last meeting. Right, we talked about how, the whole county goes Republican every time because of voter turnout in part and because the suburbs come in to vote and the city doesn't.
Yeah.
So it seems to me the only way to make this happen is to get the city to come.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's
Which
huge.
is like,
And that's why we've been talking about doing a pretty significant radio spend at WDKX and the Beat, because those are focused at the African American demographic. Yes.
Don't wait too long, make sure you get it out in time for them to register in time to vote.
was it 30 days? Is that
Until mid-October.
Mid-October?
There was a I think you asked a question about Fatimat's name.
Yes.
Fatinat, last name Reid.
Oh, okay.
Fatinat, Fatimat.
The traditional way is done.
We can put it on Slack too.
Mary, you had a question?
Oh, I was just going to say that Indivisible also has done text banking in addition to phone banking, and that's important.
Yeah. So we know we're not going to be a big dollar race. We just can't make a phone call over to the Hall of Justice and say, everybody, do you like your job? Pay some money. I'm overstating it a bit, just because I know this is on camera. I'll back that up. I know you're not all corrupt over there. But that's what we're up against.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time.
So thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And this is going to tie into our endorsement process, which is the next big thing that we're going to try and do. We have to work through our process so